It's Traffic Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Thursday, August 7th. Well, another interesting day, I would say, that we've had in the market. It seems like we're getting one of these every day. For some reason, I say this in almost every one of these videos. It was an interesting day. I mean, that's kind of just what it's been like. And it's been a market to kind of keep you on your toes. My thought about this market was today, and by the way, risk disclaimer in front of you, everything that we're going through is for information purposes only in this video. But my thought is, and even more so, I guess, in the summertime with that we're being in August. But you get a gift like you get this morning, and it's kind of best to maybe even ring the register, and then I'll add to this is that, hey, you could in the summertime, if you're taking off some time, hey, you come in, you ring the register. Why is the market up 1% or 0.5% into the beginning of the day with no real reason for it? What do? You ring the register, and then you go for a walk, you go play golf, you go swimming in the summertime, but I think that is one of the best things I could say for you. And in terms of um, when this market gives you these gap ups like this, it's not meant to be really chased. Sometimes the market will continue, but we know that if you think about, odds, and that's how you should be thinking about the market in terms of probability and odds, it's just not very probable that you're going to extend above a big gap up for a second day. And remember yesterday the cues for whatever reason just kept on grinding up, and a lot of that, I think the performance was derived from what the big names were doing, what the Magnificent Seven names were doing, which that's fine. But there really, for the rest of the market, it was quite weak yesterday. So you take a really weak breath day yesterday where the market rallied, you get follow through on a gap up today, which I have no idea why we gapped up. And if you're not if you're not thinking about reading the register, or excuse me, ringing the register, then these things should be in your trading plan. I have that in my trading plan. I guess I can't. This screen's not working here, but stop screen share, and then I'll just screen share again here. But I have this built into my spreadsheet where I've got my trading rules, and one of them is, you know, when a gap up, you should be. And again, you don't have to, like, for me in trading, right? It's not. I'm not going to sell the whole position unless it's something that I'm just in for a trade. But at least I'm taking some profits off the table, and I did that in stocks that I got long yesterday: CRDO, Broadcom, which I forgot to mention Broadcom in yesterday's video. There was a big call buying in that, but think I got distracted with all the earnings that we're getting. But this is just trading 101. And if you're a long-term investor, these things do depend on your time frame. I know you can't read all of this, but you will get all of this if you're in my trading room. But these are things that I kind of go over in the morning. I say, hey, we got another gap up, I'm selling into this thing, and I'm always a net seller on the days of when we gap up. So let's talk a little bit about the price action for the day. I'm just going to bring up SPY first. All right, so there we go. So just looking at the, so it's a bit right now of some back and forth price action. We have ascended back here from right basically where we were when we closed. I think this is on Thursday, going back to Thursday of last week. So we're kind of back. Some people like to say we're back to the scene of the crime. Um, I would say that this is a tough market to kind of read on a day-to-day basis. I mentioned that the breadth was not particularly good yesterday. I don't like to see that. I don't like to see when we're going up we see divergences. But I also know that kind of like anything goes for this first half of the first half of the month, because it's supposed to be weak and there's supposed to be lower liquidity, and it does feel like that. But let's go to the Qs chart here for just a second. I thought the Qs was quite revealing. So we are now above the value area. Again, you just have to worry about where you're kind of, yeah, as I would say for this week. It's probably not the best thing to say, but for this week, we've had a very nice positive week. But you do have to be careful about where you're entering positions. And this was something that, if you've been watching my videos, I talk about this a lot, and I talked about it a lot I think in Friday's video, where I talked about buying the close and selling the open over time is the trade that really works on average, right? Trying to buy the open and especially on gap ups don't work. So again, why am I going over this in detail? Because I think a lot of I get a lot of questions and I see what traders do in the beginning of the day. There's a lot of traders that come in every day and they're setting up for the open and what are they going to buy every morning? Right? One of the hardest things to do as traders is to come in, take some profits and sit. Right. And that's what I said. Go for a walk, go play golf and then come back in the afternoon and see how things set up. That's kind of that's not a bad plan on any gap up day. Right. Because again, that is where you're making your money. And you can, again, I'm going to move on from this because I talked about this all Friday, but I think it's a concept. The reason why I repeat myself with this stuff is because I do run a trading room and I see what traders do every day and I see when, and I see it on social media too. Traders get frustrated. They think that they're going to start buying in the first hour and then they get frustrated and then they're like, geez, this market's been really tough to trade. True, yes, but I think it's not that bad if you understand the mechanics of the market, right? And somebody else said to me on social media, they're like, "Geez, there's so much manipulation." It's not manipulation. This is something that's been going on and I have the data for going back from when they started SPY. And I think that's 1993 or somewhere around there. That's where the data is. So stop thinking it's manipulated and understand that that's the mechanics of the market over time. You buy the close and you sell the open, and that works. That the performance of something like that is up like around 500% on average. Again, you have to think about these things on average. There could be any day where the market does sell off in the after hours, but over time, that's where the gains are made versus buying the open and selling the close. Going back 30 years, it's like plus 8%. That's it. If that's the way you're going to trade. So please don't tweet at me and say, oh well, the market is manipulated, right? No, this is how the market. Stop thinking that the market is manipulated and understand how it works. All right, so let's move on from that. But cues, I think good thing we're above the value area. We did rally back. We had a nice rally back in the last hour of the day, almost to come all the way back. Here's a level to watch. I've got two levels to watch for you. This is the top of the value area for the week. Right? Why is this important? Because it defines resistance. You could see we stopped right there. Right? That was your resistance for the day. That box. And I know this is a little bit tough to see, so I'm going to remove this. Right? This box is the value area for the week, which is based on all of last week's activity with roughly one standard deviation around it. This comes up over and over and over. If you trade with anchored VWAPs, right? These things come into play as well for you because it's kind of the same concept. The nice thing about the value areas and why I use the value areas is there's no manipulation. So there is manipulation. Anchored VWAPs, you always have to define where you're going to anchor. Right? And people do this trick where they're like, well, this line didn't work. Let me try a different anchor. I'm going to go back and look at the anchor from the beginning of the month. Okay. I'm going to look at the anchor from the beginning of the week. I mean, it's for using the value areas, it's the same thing. We have a value area for the week, we have a value area for the month, we have a value area for the year. Right. And you can't change it, you can't manipulate it to make it best fit. Also note that this today, right, we kind of came back and we checked back to the top of the value area. So that's 566.42. So we held support, but we also got rejected at a little bit of resistance. That's what we have in the market right now, right? Playing a little bit of, understanding that there is resistance, right? And again, here's this level that I just mentioned here, 566.42, right? That's for the Qs. All right. For the IWM, which is it held in there. It held right around the. Well, I don't want to say it held in there, but this is very tricky. This started to go down. If we look at the 5 minute today, there was no question about this. They saw the opportunity of a gap up, and they just sold into it. Right? And they basically sold until we got to about 11:30, where volume dries up. right? Speaking of VWAP algorithm, I used to trade with the VWAP algorithm all the time when I was an institutional trader. And I know that in the middle of the day, there's very little volume. If somebody is selling or buying over the day and using a VWAP algorithm, which is one of the most popular algorithms to trade with, right? There's very little trading that happens between 11:30 and about 1 o'clock, right? And then, of course, volume picks up and that algorithm begins to kind of trade a little bit heavier. But that's exactly where IWM picked up when they're in low volume. Um, didn't really come back. Didn't have that, you know. And again, look at the difference between SPY, a little bit more of a pickup there at the end of the day, and then Qs. All right, so let's just going over what the indices do. Again, if having a little bit of a basis of what the indices do, even if you're a single stock trader. I mean, I don't really trade that much. Every once in a while, I'll scalp with the indices, but I trade single stocks because that's where the alpha is in the market. All right, let's go over a couple of those movers for the day. I'm going to start with what do I want to start with? I'm going to start with Microsoft, right? We know that Microsoft. Why am I going to start with Microsoft? Because I bought Microsoft today. Why did I buy Microsoft? Because I've been patiently waiting for this to come in, and here it is. We've basically very close. Now, I don't know. Maybe we need another day or another more days of downside, but I know I've got support here at 515.24. That's the top of the value area for the month. And that is also, we've also just about filled that earnings gap. Right? I guess here is what the official earnings gap would be down here, right around that 515 level. But I've been waiting to get involved in this, and I wanted to buy the dip into support, right? Buying the dip into support, which is a lot of what I'm doing, right? And that's why we keep a actionable list of names that have earnings, because some of them will do this. They'll come in, right, and they're just checking back to the trend, right, into this sense, to the top of the value area. I don't think this will go all the. Oh, where's my 20-day moving average? For some reason, I don't have that on. This top of the value area also lines up with the 20-day. So if it comes down to the 20-day moving average, I will probably buy a little bit more of Microsoft. That's a name that I feel pretty comfortable in. I've just been kind of waiting to get involved. Stock has come in from 552 to 520. Other concepts that I want to go over. Well, let's talk a little bit about. I didn't mention Broadcom in the video yesterday, but I was able to, again, right around the highs of the day. I took a target at 309 because again, the market kind of gave that to me. Right, take what the market gives you. Right, that was a nice percentage move for the day, and we saw a real big call buyer in this yesterday. So I think it was the August 29th calls. Nice move there. What else? Robinhood uh, did just fine. I mean, this thing looked like it was really setting up. I've been in and out of Robinhood over the last year. I've been in it now. I'm in it now. I did take one profit target into this because I just didn't want to take a 4 or 5% move and just do nothing, because this market, comes in, gives you opportunities. Take for example Oracle. Right? A lot of the software names were weak today. Oracle coming back down again. Now, I did not add to it today. Again, I don't want to add to every single position today just because it comes in, but this to me is another opportunity. Down 2.7%. Notice what Oracle has done every time it's reported earnings. Since it's reporting earnings, it dips, they buy it. It dips, and I buy it. All right. So speaking of, we were talking about this. I'm going to go off tangent a little bit. Some of these names, like MP, ran into earnings, and I was long. I got long MP materials last on the first of the month. I was looking for um, dip opportunities. I was positioned very so that I could play offense when we had that market dip on the first. And one of the names that I bought was MP Materials. And since then, it worked really well for me. Now, I did take the position off, but it's kind of funny if you read the numbers, right, for MP Materials, they did not have do anything great here. Right? Their earnings were adjusted EPS. They lost money, negative 13 cents. Now they did beat the estimates of negative 18 cents, but they're losing money. Sales beat slightly, 57 million versus 46 million, which is essentially nothing, right? 57 million dollars is, for a company that is now trading where it is. But the market the market doesn't care. Like they didn't even care about the earnings report, right? It immediately went up after the earnings report. There is so much positive sentiment right now in this company. It doesn't matter what they report, right? That's how sometimes earnings works. They're just waiting for the number and then they're going to buy it no matter what. And I get that, right? The numbers that came across the tape, right? All the contracts that they're getting and all the hype you heard about MP Materials when Tim Cook was in I was at the White House yesterday with Trump. MP Materials, the name was dropped, right? So yeah, I mean, so it's kind of crazy, right? That this is how it works, and in any event, you got a nice move there. And then also like on the flip side, like look at TDD for example, right? The company now I believe the CFO left, and maybe that's part of it, but it's almost like they're not even looking, like they're shooting first, right? Nobody wants this company, especially like after again, I'm not trying to be mean with TTD Trade Desk, but App 11 had good numbers. They rallied, right? They were upbeat in their conference call, but Trade Desk beat numbers, right? So they had numbers. Now they weren't they weren't like the best numbers in the world, but third quarter EBITDA 77 million versus 277 million versus 275. Revenue 717 million versus 716, which by the way is like over 10 times as much as MP Materials made, and they crushed the stock. They just don't want this stock right now, right? Because I don't think that this is that warranted, but it's just out of favor and they're crushing it, right? They're going to crush it down 20-30 bucks because because I don't know, maybe they missed a whisper number or something. So it's just funny to me how this stuff works. And again, I don't, there's no reason like for me to second guess this stuff. It's just out of favor. Right. And you look at the stock and it clawed back from the last time that reported earnings. Right. It had it's been clawing. Remember, it kind of had a couple reports where it just completely um, did very poorly. But regardless, some companies, even though they kind of came back, they're for whatever reason, the street just doesn't think that they're the way to go for the future. And again, I'm not trying to pick on TTD. I'm just noticing like that's such a severe move. Now, you could go ahead, you could try to buy the dip. A couple of traders in the trading room did that, but it's tough because you know, there's it just seems out of favor. SEZL, we were talking about this company yesterday. Now, I actually bought some stock at $100, and I'm already selling into it. But that's why I'm a little bit late doing the recap today. But here's a name too. Like I talked about this in yesterday's video. You have to look at where the companies come from, right? The last when they reported earnings, they were a $50 stock. They rallied up to 78, right? And on the earnings gap, they continue to go up to $180, right? So, this was not to me like we were talking about the expectations, and my comment to a trader was the expectations are super high. I get it; it's off the absolute highs a little bit, but look at what it's done since the last quarter. Now they're really going to have to back up their numbers. If you listen, so why did I buy them at $100? Because 40% down is a little bit of extreme. The numbers that they came in look pretty good to me. They put numbers 69 cents versus 58. Here's maybe one of the issues. It's that their guidance was a little bit light, 325 versus 326. I didn't see that when I originally bought the shares, but their adjusted EPS was 78 versus 58, sales 98 versus 94, right? So that to me, like, I don't have something that says, a model that says, oh my God, this is too, a sell off of 40% is too low. But I'm like, okay, that seems a little bit extreme. And I was able to, like I said, I bought some at 10. Where did I buy this thing at? I bought some at $100.70, and I sold some at 108, which is where it's trading right now. So that's a story there. Just to kind of go over a couple other trades for the day. Not every trade worked perfectly for me. I tried. I was in OKLO yesterday, and I saw OKLO was down about 1 or 2%, and I bought some, and it kept on going lower. So I got stopped out of the trade, even though if you look, it finally stopped right on support. It just needed to get down to support. Look at that. Top of value perfect all the way down to 70, about $77, 76.87, and perfect bounce there, right around 215 today. So again, knowing where your support is, because this thing went all the way down. Reminder that these uranium names, nuclear names, can really move, and it did just that. So, but like I said, not every trade was perfect for me today, but certainly selling into the open helped. Couple other names I'm just going to go over for you really quickly. Some names that I'm involved in: CRDO. So I talked about Microsoft already. Again, I took profits right around the highs of the day. I did not do anything else in this today. We'll be watching. Astera Labs is one that I'm watching, but it might just hang out here a little bit, as well as a number of other names that kind of gap up like this. I'm just going to go through a couple of reports too for you guys. Stop screen sharing. All right, Expedia's up big after hours, just to kind of go over some of these gaps. Cart looks like it follows Dash. Nice report there. Carmen is up nicely. Docs is up. These are all large companies, by the way. Take two's up 3%. So not as drastic as what we saw the moves yesterday. TTD, like I said, is 26 down 26%. Twilio, which we saw a big put buyer earlier in the week. That stock is down decently. That was a good heads up in that name. Let's go to some of the smaller names. Oh, one other thing. There is something else that I wanted to go over with you guys. Again, going over some of these things to kind of help a little bit. Twilio, I think Pins is down. Frogger is up 13%. SoundCloud, look at that, is up. SoundHound, excuse me, is up 12% on that one. Again, I don't own any of these names. Oust, Ousters, look at that, is up 11%. So, in any event, what I would say for this market, game plan, right? You should be thinking about this like every day before the opening of the market, right? And even on the weekend, you should be thinking about your game plan, right? This is not for me anyway. You could do whatever you like. But for August is a tougher month. You've got to think a little bit different. So if you were gunslinging, like a month ago, right? In July, when everything with short squeezes were going on, right? And anything with a short interest, like Coles went up like 20% one day last week. Completely moronic, but whatever. Open table, or not open table. What's it called? Open shut door, open door technologies, right? Had a short squeeze in that name, right? So that was working really well for being a gunslinger and like going after names like that with short interest once you heard somebody was going after this, right? But this month is different. This month is more of a grind them out type month. Earnings report to me. Earning season is always a bit more difficult, so think about that. Think about your entry prices have to be so. And I've talked a lot about making sure that you sell into gap opens or gap ups. Sorry, I can't speak anymore for the day. But doing those types of things, if doing those little things, we're not making those mistakes and buying big on a gap up day, right? That's gonna separate whether or not you're a profitable trader this month, right? Because it's a more difficult situation, right? So going through those things and trying to reduce some of the errors that you make, is going to separate whether or not you're going to be profitable for the day, for the week, and the month. Remember, do not blame the market, right? The market is what it is. It's up to you to be able to trade the market well.